Donald Trump met with Benjamin Netanyahu and the head of the Mossad, and they sold him a bill of goods. They sold him on not only the threat of Iran, which Donald Trump has bought into hook, line, and sinker, go back to the spring of 2018 when Netanyahu came and sold Donald Trump on the concept of a Mossad raid on Tehran that gained access to a nuclear archive. And then he showed him a bunch of documents to prove the Iranians were lying about the JCPOA and they were pursuing a secret nuclear weapons program. And Donald Trump is so stupid and he's surrounded by so many sycophants that they didn't do the obvious things, such as, hey, at least 3 of these documents that you're presenting us as new in this archive are the same documents that you tried to sell the IAEA back in 2004 and 2009, which were proven to be forgeries, forged by Israeli intelligence to try and do the same thing, create the perception of Iranian nuclear intent that doesn't exist. But nobody had the courage to tell Donald Trump that, or he was just too stupid to understand that, and Netanyahu got away with it. There is no Iranian nuclear weapons program. Never has been, and isn't going to be one. No matter how much people in your audience and elsewhere say they need to have a weapon. Well, they don't want one. So their need isn't manifested by your desire. They don't want one, and they're not going to build one. But Trump made his decision. Now he was sold on that, but more importantly, he was sold on regime change. That the Iranian regime is about to collapse. The inherent weakness of Vilayat Faqih, the supreme, the rule of the supreme jurisprudent, having the supreme leader, the Islamic Republic. He was being sold on the fact that the Iranians are increasingly secular, that this notion of Shia faith doesn't dig deep. The Twelver Shiism is a fanatic religion that exists on the periphery of Iran. It's not part of the fundamental essence of the modern Iranian state. And that if we simply just come in, kill the supreme leader, suppress certain military leadership, we can bring about regime change. And then when regime change happens, we will be able to shut down ballistic missiles, shut down nuclear. In the meantime, we have enough military force to prevent the Iranians from effectively launching missiles. We can suppress until we can get a new regime to eliminate. The Strait of Hormuz isn't a problem. They'll shut it down. We'll reopen it. Again, we'll reopen it. The primary tactic is regime change. Remove the regime. The regime will open up Strait of Hormuz. Everything will be good. Everything hinged on regime change. The Israelis sold the president on this bill of goods. And the president now recognizes that regime change failed and that they didn't accomplish this, that the regime is actually stronger today than ever before. And therefore, all of the other objectives are unattainable. This is the reality. The Israelis sold this to the president, and the president now realizes the Israelis sold him a bill of goods. So where is Israel today? Well, Israel still needs the United States to be involved. Israel is operating under the assumption that it will be able to initiate an action, and through Iranian response, the United States will be dragged back in. That's one of the goals and objectives of this. The problem is the Israelis can't initiate an action without the Americans being complicit in this, because Israel cannot carry out an air campaign against Iran of any significance without close, continuous coordination with U.S. Central Command. And right now, Central Command is shutting that down because we don't want a war with Iran. So where are the Israelis now? Well, first of all, understand that they're getting their asses handed to them in Lebanon. I mean, this is about as embarrassing and humiliating as it gets. Hezbollah is supposed to be defeated, can't continue and sustain the fight, is literally stomping the death out of the IDF. They're beating them on the frontline contact, but now through the introduction of FPV drones, first-person view drones, many of them having fiber optic cable, they're bringing death and destruction 20 to 30 kilometers into the Israeli depth. The Israelis weren't prepared for this. Hint, hint, America. This is your future if you want to go to war against Russia, because you'll not get anywhere. The drones dominate the skies. Israel can't move without dying. And so they're losing Lebanon. Before, the Israelis were saying there could be no, we're going to finish Lebanon. No matter what you want to do with Iran, America, we're finishing Lebanon. It's over. And we played the game. We brought in Barak, who sat down and negotiated with it was supposed to be a Israeli-Lebanon negotiation, but Hezbollah wasn't part of it. Hezbollah is the only voice that counts in Lebanon today when it comes to Israel, because they're winning. They defeat Israel. And so you have Hezbollah winning, which is supposed to happen, and Israel has no chance of defeating them. We're at the point right now where Israel has to declare defeat. They can't win. They can't prevail. They're getting beat by Hezbollah right now. So that's a big reality. Two, the United States isn't going to play this game anymore. 60% of Americans don't support Israel. And that number is going to get higher and higher and higher. Israel knows. So what did Benjamin Netanyahu do? Benjamin Netanyahu said, in 10 years, we have to cut off our financial ties to the United States. That means the whole enterprise, the whole Thomas Massey, we will outspend you and buy American democracy enterprise is going away, because Israel recognizes that while you may be able to vote out Thomas Massey in the long term, the enterprise is going to collapse. So they need an additional source of funding. Where are they going to get their money? Well, it's not going to come from the inherent economic strength of Israel, which was supposed to happen with the Abrams Accord combined with the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. That's not going to happen. None of that's going to happen. So where does Israel get its replacement for American largesse? The answer is the United Arab Emirates. Netanyahu has admitted he traveled to the UAE during the war. Israel has sent troops to the UAE to protect them with air defense. And the UAE has pulled out of OPEC Plus and has gone on its own to sell maximum amounts of energy on the market to do what? To underwrite the Israeli security architecture that will replace the failed American architecture over the United Arab Emirates. And this vehicle, Israel UAE, will be used to sustain the conflict against Iran. That's their theory. That's their bet. The problem is, are the Iranians, who have just basically come out and said, we will terminate the UAE's existence as a viable modern nation state on day one if the conflict begins. And it's very easy to do. You shut down energy production, very vulnerable to that. You shut down desalinization plant, no water. Right now it's 50, 54 degrees in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. You don't have drinking water, you die. And you shut down power generation, which means no air conditioning. So basically the UAE, which has sold itself as one of the most technologically, societally modern societies in the region, will die. The Iranians say, we'll bring you back to the age of the camel, which is true. If you take out water, you take out energy, they got nothing. And this will happen instantaneously. The Iranians have said that once this starts, they will begin wave after wave every hour firing nonstop missiles and drones against an entire spectrum of targets, inclusive of energy targets and desalinization plants in the UAE. It'll go for hour after hour, day after day, week after week, and Iran has the forces to sustain this. America, at best, can continue a conflict on the scope and scale of the 37-day war for a week. Then we run out of everything. We run out of long-range standoff strike weapons. We run out of air defense, and the Iranians will not run out of it. This is the reality. This is why the United States can't attack Iran, because to do so, it's not just a temporary reduction of energy production capacity going to market. It's the permanent elimination of significant quantities of energy going to market, and there's nothing to replace it in the global energy. So you will get a collapse of the global economy. And we're talking about when you cut off this much oil, refineries stop working. When they stop working, they go away. Pipelines cease to function, they go away. The entire infrastructure that the globe needs to survive starts to crash because we can't keep the energy in that the world needs. And you start having these deficits, economies collapse, and it's a spinning, spiraling effect. And we come back then to the United States and the American consumer. It's the economy, stupid. And the president better understand that. And I think he does. This is why he's not going to attack Iran, because to attack Iran is the financial collapse of the region, the world, and the United States. And it's the end of him politically. That's all he cares about. This is a narcissist. He needs, when he finishes his presidency, to be able to say, I was the greatest president that ever walked the face of the earth. And he needs to surround himself with people who will repeat that to him. And he will build monuments to himself and all that. But his presidency is going to end differently. He's going to be impeached, and he's going to be convicted, and he's going to be put on trial. He'll be thrown out of the White House in disgrace. And when that happens, the Democrats will go in for the kill. They will dismantle Trump's industry. They'll find out about all the crimes that are being committed right now. Every crime being committed. Jared Kushner is going to jail. His daughter is going to jail. Steve Witkoff's going to jail. Everybody who has profited from this corrupt enterprise called, the Trump administration will go to jail. The people who are betting, shorting the energy market, going long on the energy market, timing it to the social media accounts of Donald Trump, they will go to jail. There will be a total cleansing of the House. And that's it for the Trump legacy. He was upset with New York when, after he got elected president, you were driving into Manhattan, you come down to, the Hudson, Henry Hudson, and then it turns into the river, and you look to your left, and they had a whole host of buildings. They all say Trump, 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 Trump. And after he got elected, they all took it down because Trump didn't own a single one of those buildings. He just branded them. He said, put the Trump name up there, and people will come. But the problem is he got elected and everybody went, we hate you, Donald Trump. And so they took it down because it was a bad brand. The Trump brand is going to be over, finished, destroyed. He will go to jail. His family will go to jail. And he sees this. This is the writing on the wall. It's inevitable unless he could get a miracle. And the miracle begins with not bombing Iran, not digging the hole deeper.
Yeah, I guess so much for all those short, that he said short-term pain, but a lot of these LNG companies are looking at short-term maximization of profits, and the scenario you just laid out, that is that's just going to lay on so many consequences that it'll be interesting to see whether those short-term profits are going to be worth all of the long-term pain that's to come if it continues like this. But Scott, yeah, your comment on the Ahmadinejad story now. Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I mean, just leaking that out there, it doesn't, I guess, it doesn't really reflect an image of strength. Maybe the New York Times and the U.S. officials, so-called U.S. officials, want to do this to weaken Trump's image even further and the U.S. administration's image even further around the war on Iran. But I'm curious on your thoughts about it, because it's a very strange, if it's all made up, it's a very strange story. If there's any truth to it, it's also a strange story. So your thoughts?
No, first of all, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran. He was a very hardline president. Under his presidency, Iran forcefully confronted the policies of the United States and in Europe regarding Iran's nuclear program. He's the one who basically said, "We're not playing by your rules anymore. We're going to do what we want to do," which had nothing to do with acquiring a nuclear weapon, everything to do with expanding Iran's ability to enrich uranium, to master the uranium fuel cycle for nuclear fuel for peaceful purposes. And he caused a lot of angst in the United States and in Israel. Israel interpreted what he was doing as seeking to existentially threaten the existential survival of Israel by possessing, if not a nuclear weapon, the ability to produce a nuclear weapon by mastering enrichment, which means that you've solved the fundamental underlying technical problem of enrichment. He was a very hardliner, though, and I forget who replaced him. It was Khamenei, not Khamenei. Khamenei. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank here. But in the election, Ahmadinejad, articulated against this guy who was looking for more moderate policies, and it got to the point where the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, sort of treated Ahmadinejad with rude. There's a whole ceremony that goes into transferring power, and the former president plays a role in the current president. And Ahmadinejad was seeking to assert himself, and he was minimized. And many people saw it as a deliberate snub by the supreme leader on the former leader. Ahmadinejad, though, turned out to be a man who, he's not corrupt. He doesn't have secret money. He retired to a very marginal life. He was a former president, and of course, people pay attention to him, but he stayed out of politics. He tried to reinsert himself in the election, got told he can't. And he just began living a very simple life as a gardener and all that. No political ambition. But here's why we come up on this. The regime change failed. The efforts of regime change failed. The story that Rouhani was a replacement, former negotiator. You're right. Thank you for the note. Sometimes reading the chat pays off. Let's give you an example of how the media today works. The Financial Times, English paper, published a story that said that Xi Jinping told Donald Trump that the Chinese felt that Putin was losing the war, and that Putin knew he was going to lose the war, and Putin was this, and Putin was that, and Xi Jinping said he shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have done that. And the idea was, of course, to create a political problem on the eve of Vladimir Putin's arrival in China. Now, the Chinese came out and said that's horse hockey, and of course it was. But the point is, the Financial Times, and I know this, to give you an example, going back to my time as a weapons inspector, I worked with MI6 on what we called a information operation. And the goal was we took intelligence that we couldn't act on because it was crap. We had it in our files, and they said, give us the stuff that's in your file that isn't actionable, meaning you can't do an inspection, and we'll feed it to our sources in the media, and they'll publish it as if it's real to create the impression in the global community that Iraq is developing and pursuing weapons of mass destruction. Operation was called Mass Appeal. Google it, guys. It's real. I know it's real because I was there. But the point is, that's what MI6 does. And As a result, I found out that MI6 owns editors and writers at major newspapers in Great Britain. Any newspapers want to sue me, please do. I love the discovery process because I can name you. We know who you are. And we now know that the guy who published it and the people who published this story are part of that process. This was an act of desperation designed to undermine, Vladimir Putin's role, because that's Britain's goal right now. The entire MI6 London station exists to do one thing, and that's to undermine Vladimir Putin. And they're the ones who generated this crap story, planted it in British media, and they ran with it. So now we come to the New York Times. The New York Times has now exposed itself that they are an active front of the CIA. And we always knew that. And it became manifest. You remember last December, at the moment when the CIA was working on a drone program to assassinate Vladimir Putin. Remember the big launch? Yeah. Same time they did the launch, there was a story that was published where the CIA said, we're the ones doing this. We're the ones giving them the intelligence. We're the ones who... Now, it was supposed to be done either after Putin was dead or Putin was weak. It was a CIA power play. Yeah. But the point is the New York Times was actively working with the CIA to create this perception. The CIA owns the New York Times. When I was a weapons inspector, again, the CIA worked with CNN to do the same thing, to make a major documentary about the work of the inspectors using intelligence information that the CIA provided. That's what they do. It's an information operation. So this Ahmadinejad story is the cheapest kind of information operation there is. They've gone back. These are people with superficial knowledge of Iran. And they've gone back and they said, oh, he got snubbed. They go with that. He got snubbed by the supreme leader. And he was embarrassed and humiliated. He tried to reinsert himself into politics, and they said no. So we can create the image of a frustrated man, a man who has an axe to grind, a man who can be bought out. And so they've invented this whole story. It's just a total 100% BS story. And the purpose of the story is, of course, to create controversy inside Iran. To start getting, we've done this before. The CIA back in the 1980s. Got one of the Palestinian liberation groups in Beirut to start killing each other because they planned a story that they had a source, that this guy ratted out this guy, and they turned on each other and they killed each other. So it can work. You can mental warfare cause people to clash from within. This is an act of mental warfare. It's designed to inject a premise into Iran's society to create a lot of people continue to support Ahmadinejad. So if the government regime was to arrest him, you create a division. Now, they're not going to arrest him because the Iranians know with 100% certainty this is literally BS. They're just like, do you think the Chinese lost any sleep, opened up the Financial Times going, or the Russians? You think Vladimir Putin went, wait a minute, what? Trump said this to Xi, and she didn't call me. I'm not going there. Oh, bullshit. We're going to stop Ukraine. We're going against China. We're going to split up, give the CIA everything they want. He went, no, because they know the truth. The Iranians know the truth. This is just the cheapest kind of information warfare. What it is, it's an act of absolute desperation. Just like planting the story in the Financial Times. Because again, think of yourself as the Financial Times. You were literally just exposed as an intelligence front. You're no longer a journalistic outlet, and people should seriously cease and desist all subscriptions to the Financial Times. It should ruin them, except it won't, but it should, because they are no longer function as journalists. They are intelligence operatives. The New York Times has now been exposed as a paper that has gone away from journalism. We knew that a long time ago, but it's not just that they're bad journalists. They're intelligence operatives. They're working on behalf of the CIA to carry out regime change plans. And so that's what this is. It's total crap, 100% crap.
And the desperation is incredibly, I think, highlighted here when one thinks that a part of the assessment, if we can call it an intelligence assessment, is that the war that the U.S. and Israel have ignited against Iran that has killed, for example, over 100 children in one strike, the very first day of it, to insinuate that Ahmadinejad betray the entire country with that kind of damage, just that one single example. But how about all the rest of it? How about the thousands of people who died before the strikes came, who were killed, and then of course all the infrastructure and people that have been killed by the actual strikes? That must have been something they factored in, like, hey, this will make people very angry if we say he's basically our, but they're insinuating themselves, which is what I think is so interesting. They're saying, okay, well, they're basically saying the U.S. and Israel, have this ace in a hole, which then underscores the actual reason why all of the consequences that have been born from this war have occurred. And it's not a great story to begin with. But any final comments on this before we move on to the Putin-Xi meeting, which you mentioned?
No, I think you pretty much wrapped it up. It's the cheapest kind of propaganda. It underscores two things: the absolute. People need to understand that the CIA has no insight into Iran, none whatsoever. In the 1980s, the CIA still had networks that dated back to the time of the Shah, when the CIA was very active in Iran, had recruited just about everybody there was to recruit, and they had some resources still in play. And then a guy named Steve Ritter, who was the head of Near East operations, my nemesis when I was doing Iraq, he basically was told we have to start focusing on Iran. And so there was a way they communicated. These guys used old school communications. They would send letters with secret writing to a post box in Munich, where the CIA has a big station. And then that's how they would communicate. But that works if one or two letters are snuck in every week, part of an overall flow of mail. Nothing stands out. But then Richter said, we got to double the reporting, triple the reporting, set the word out. We need more reports. But he didn't change the method of communication. And so suddenly, out of nowhere, all these agents are starting to send secret writing in post to Munich. And the Iranians are going, huh? And counterintelligence guys went, well, we're on to something here, floated back, and they terminated the entire network. All gone. Vast majority were ended up hung by the neck because they betrayed their country. They're dead. The CIA attempted to reconstitute that. And once again, they had a system in place. And the CIA had a method of communication that involved Gmail. I won't get into the specifics, but the bottom line is you use a Gmail address and all this kind of stuff. And again, the Iranians were able to break that and reverse engineer it, and they rolled up that network, all gone, finished, dead. They shared it with the Russians and the Chinese. The Chinese were able to go in and clean up all the CIA's networks in China, and the Russians, I think the CIA was able to dismantle what they did, and the Russians didn't quite get as far along as they wanted to. But the point is, we have no human resources inside Iran. So what happened at this time? It's a high-profile target. Give you an example. The NSA built something called Stuxnet, which is a virus that was supposed to go in and infect the Iranian nuclear enrichment program, their centrifuges. And it did it going through controllers, Siemens controllers, etc. The Israelis cooperated. Now, to get it into Iran, though, we don't have any human intelligence. We don't have any, so we had to turn to the Israelis. The Israelis have a whole bunch of human intelligence inside Iran, because the Israelis are patient, they're long-term. They don't do stupid things like make them double up their reporting using secret writing on postal or use a Gmail account that doesn't work. And so we basically transferred the human intelligence aspect to Israel. We would provide operational oversight. We would provide conceptual work, but the Israelis would execute. Assassinations, we played a heavy role in that, but the Israelis executed. Stuxnet, it was the Israelis that broke through the air gap to get the virus into the system. And so we became hostage to Israeli control of the human intelligence aspects of Iran. So